Hi guys, I hope you can hear me and you can see my screen as well. Uh, so so basically I'm going to start this session, and before I start, I will be talking, I will be giving some housekeeping details, and then we can start the session. Just to let you know that this session is if you think about advanced agile concepts, then it's a whole 2 days course, and it is definitely not possible to talk about all the concepts here in this 1 hour session. But at the same time, here you will get the snapshots of what we are talking in terms of advanced agile, what exactly is advanced agile, and how basically is relevant to us. Uh, so just to give you some ideas here, I mean, we all practitioners have been working in different projects, different companies, and uh, trying to trying to give the value to the business using agile methodologies. So the whole idea is not to just work using agile, but to basically provide the business value. Now, when we talk about the business value, then the concept may change the way you think about it, and after a period of time, you will find that even if you are completely religiously, implementing agile, then still your company is basically goes for a toss, and in the recent past you must have seen many live examples of that. So if you talk about Nokia, so Nokia was one of the companies based on whose name based on which name the Nokia test was defined to test whether the teams are implementing agile in the right way or not. Fine. But at the same time, so that means they were implementing agile in a religious way. But then what happened? You can see that uh, I mean the company got sold, resold, and all that, and because of all the disruptions, um, Nokia could not deal with that. So then the question is like, what got missing? I mean, is it like, do we need to continue focusing on implementing in the right fashion, or do we need to talk about a little bit more? So, so these are the kind of concepts, basically, which you find that agile is not a silver bullet. There is much more beyond that. And also, while implementing agile, it's not that you are supposed to use only Scrum or XP or whatever. um, there is a whole lot of knowledge available, or the concepts have been defined for a long time, which can be used and reused in our agile projects. So, so far I talked about 2 points. One is like, um, even after implementing agile, you may fail, and then we will see like why that happens. Second point is that when you talk about agile, then basically it's a set of values and principles. But the point is that we just try to limit that to certain ceremonies and roles and responsibilities. And so that means our sphere, the knowledge, gets limited because of that. And depending on that, like whatever the kind of real world challenges you face in the real projects, complex projects, it becomes very difficult to deal with them. Fine. So with those that basically background in mind, uh, let me focus about why advanced agile this workshop, this session. So one of the thing is that as I mentioned, organizations still fail, and one of the reason why what I've seen is, and people have seen, is that there is a difference between uh, doing things right versus doing the right things. Fine. So if you talk about agile, then it's, earlier we were using waterfall processes, and that used to have a long lead time because of all the um, sequential processes. Uh, but now, because of using agile techniques, we get to move towards definition of done as soon as possible. Fine. Uh, but the point is that uh, that means what we are trying to do is we are making our process efficient. So earlier it used to take, for example, uh, 2 years. Now we are able to ship something within 2 weeks, for example. Uh, but irrespective of the efficiency or the uh, cycle time, which has been reduced a lot through agile techniques, the question is that are we working on the right thing? So, so basically, with the agile processes, you may be doing doing things right, but if you are not working on the right thing, then whatever you're doing is a waste. And that can be one of the reasons, like when you see the disruptions happening in the market. So it's not just basically working uh, on the linear process or linear way of thinking. You have to think beyond what you have been doing so far for a long time. And that may be one of the reasons why basically organizations like Nokia gets eclipsed by newer organization day by day. Fine. Uh, so when we talk about doing the right things, then in the last few years there have been some of the concepts which have been pretty popular around that, or around that. And one of some of them are lean startups and design thinking techniques, which are uh, all about finding, uh, basically iteratively finding in a cost efficient way what is the right thing to do. Um, and when you basically find that in a very cost efficient way, then you can basically implement that using agile techniques. Fine. Um, so the point is that when we are talking about lean startups, sometimes we feel that or sometimes people feel that lean startup practices are just for the startups. Uh, but uh, but what I've seen is that they can be used pretty efficiently in the product development process as well. So so the whole idea is, like, for example, you are trying to implement a feature which takes, for example, 2 months, and you deliver it, and then you find that it is not what the customer needs, or let's forget about whether the customer needs or not, but even they don't really care about that feature at all. So you spend a lot of money on that, and then you find that nobody cares. So instead of that, what about uh, what about something like a fake door UX pattern? So the idea is that one of the idea is that, so for example, one of the uh, application required that they wanted to implement social uh, social networking as part of their website, and then so that feature implementation would have taken around 1 month or so to them. And if you think about the amount of money, it can be a couple of grands in terms of dollars. And uh, the the point is that what the team decided was that instead of implementing that feature, they basically provided a replica which looks like a kind of social networking, but that inside it is not a social networking. So basically they with a limited set of users, they launched that idea as part of their A/B testing, and then try to see whether that particular feature, I mean, how many people are clicking on that feature. After clicking, basically they would say that this feature will be available pretty soon, something like that. But the point is that with this 1 day implementation or 1 or 2 days implementation, they were trying to see whether this feature is even required by the users or not, or how many people are interested in that. When they found that enough people are looking for that, then basically they started implementing it. So think about it, if you're talking about the product ownership, so whatever we think as a kind of features required, they are just pure guess until unless we get the right feedback from the end users. Fine. So if we basically, instead of creating those features and then finding that nobody is using them, if we basically look at certain techniques with which we get to have prototypes in the market, and you are able to get the feedback from the end users in a capital efficient way, then you may be removing a lot of waste. Basically, whatever the waste, the features which are created and nobody uses them are waste anyways. Fine. So the point is that this is one of the thing which gets missing when you try to implement go with the agile techniques only, and you don't look for the validated learning as part of the implementation. So that is one thing which gets missing. Second thing is that uh, even though uh, we by default, I think more than 90% people may be using Scrum, but I mean, if you think about it, that Scrum is not really agile. Fine. Agile is much more than that. So the point is that you then don't have to get limited with set of events, rules, and rules which is defined by Scrum. So even if you are basically just merely for following Scrum events, then and basically you're not open to the ideas what can be implemented in that particular situation, then you may be having problems. You may have problems. So certain teams basically try to implement these things in a mechanical way, and then the real reason why they were doing it, that goes for a toss. The focus in many of the teams remain on the output. So when you think about the output, they focus about the velocity, story points. Sorry. Uh, can you please mute, guys? So what I was saying is that the focus continues to remain on the output, which is all about the story points, um, and people really try to think about in terms of the productivity. But think about it, like whatever the features are given to the market are purely guesses that they will be working in the market. Real feedback comes when you see the validated feedback from the market. Fine. So the focus generally remains on generating features, creating features more and more. But if you think about it, like the simplicity is the uh, is one of the utmost sophistication, basically. So if you talk about Apple, if you talk about many other known product organizations, they focus more on the simplicity. So they remove features than they basically put the features. So even one single feature, if it is added, they have to really think why it is basically being there. So the point is that it's not about like you are creating more features and you will be more successful. uh, Many times it is about the simplicity uh, which really helps the user actually. So in that perspective, the focus should be on the outcome and not the output. The problem is that the I mean it is very easy to focus on the output. I mean, simple. It's very simple. Like you identify the features, you basically estimate them, and then you basically keep on generating them. But the point is that I mean, if you think about outcome is all about get. I mean, you deploy it in the production. After deploying to the production, you try to get the data using analytics and matrices, and then see whether your features are working or not. So that is much more really hard work. You need to have the A/B testing and all that analytics related stuff. So it is much more I mean, it's not easy than compared to just getting the numbers. But basically, if you think about the business, that is what they I mean, it requires the money it is spending should have some ROI. Some Scrum guide leaves how open-ended. So if you think about real world projects, then they face real world challenges. Scrum guide focuses on uh, what and why, uh, but then if you think about how, that goes missing. And because of that, I mean, it's not like this is a fault of the Scrum guide. I think what they have done is they have left the implementation of many of the things open-ended, so that based on the context you can use the techniques which works for you. But the point is that because of that, many people do not go beyond Scrum or guide or the practices defined over there. Um, if you So beyond Scrum or Agile, there are a lot of extensive tools available, like Toyota Production System, from which Lean came, theory of constraints, psychology. So all these fields are also there, which really help you uh, in uh, so giving you tools which help you in resolving the problems, real world problems which you have in the life, not on live, but in your project. Fine. So I think one of the message which comes out is that you don't have to get limited with the agile literature. You need to go beyond, because many of the things in Agile, Scrum have come from the Toyota Production System. We have taken the tools, but basically the culture, the underlying philosophy, how the ecosystem really worked, the cultural aspects, the mindset aspect, how they worked, and how they can be implemented in different organizations. So that kind of understanding goes missing, and because of that, we find that we don't have enough tools to resolve the problems. Fine. So with this context, like why this whole idea of advanced agile is there, let me try to get into uh, the idea of uh, certain how things which are basically kept open-ended. Fine. So that is the focus of this session. Just a moment. So, sorry, just a moment. So basically, here I will be talking about the challenge which we generally face as part of our agile implementation, collaboration, and self-organization. Many times, if you take any of the Scrum literature, agile literature, the focus is on the self-organization and organizing teams. But in practice, how many self-organizing teams have we really seen? Uh, I mean, in my experience, it has been very difficult to find self-organizing teams. But fortunately, from my own experience, I have seen few of the teams which were self-organizing, and I could analyze that why they were self-organizing and why others are not. The second point is that collaboration. So the focus goes on the mechanics of how Scrum should work, but at the same time, one of the key glue or the key ingredient of making this your implementation successful is a collaboration. And most of the times, I've seen that that goes for a toss. Fine. So in this part, basically, I'll focus about like why that happens and what can be the remedy to basically resolve that. So first of all, let's try to understand what is self-organization. Self-organization from the Wikipedia is all about spontaneous order, which is a process where some form of overall order arises from local interactions between parts of initially disordered system. The process is spontaneous, not needing control by any external agent. The resultant organization is wholly decentralized, distributed over all the components of the system. So if you think about this definition from the team aspect, I would say that the teams I have seen, they have been able to work on their so as far as the Scrum ceremonies are concerned, they were able to do them without any assistance of the Scrum Master. So even if the Scrum Master was not available, they were doing them. The question is, how could they do that? And the answer comes from the motivation. Where does the motivation comes from? So that we will answer again further in the coming slides. Fine. Uh, so so the question is that why teams lack self-organization. Um, so just a moment. Yeah. So why teams lack self-organization? So what I've seen is that Scrum team not doing Scrum, and I mean, it can be pretty intriguing because you can see that there may be. I mean, people have been talking about Scrum button for a long, long time, and I think that you maybe think that maybe the reason that they may not be really adhering to the practices of Scrum or following the events in the right fashion, and that's why Scrum team is not doing Scrum. Maybe the right point over here, but that's not the point. The if you the major message of that is the picture which I've shown to you. So Scrum is something which where everybody contributes to the team goal all the time. And one of the things which you see in this picture is that they are working together towards one team goal. In general, in many of the teams, what I have seen is that, or you might have seen as well as that, in terms of the collaboration, I mean, that may not be a frequent collaboration. That may be the need basis collaboration. So think about it like, in case you disperse this team and everybody is working in isolation. uh, Fine, so they're working solo as the players. Can they work in that fashion? Can they work as a team? Certainly not. I mean, if they are working from different places and everybody is solo, they are all alone, then definitely that is not actually the team we are talking about. Team is something which can see what everybody is going through, what is the reflection of other, and then how I can basically take the next step, something like that. But if you in our teams, what I've seen is that it is all about um, I mean, swim lane based approach we follow. Swim lane based scrum board, where depending, so for example, if you have 4 people, so 4 people, 4 developers will take individual user story and they will keep on working on that. So they are working solo on each story. So you may find that till half of the sprint, nothing is really done. And the test, it goes to the testing even only after a week, for example. Till that time, everything is in progress. Fine. So you see that everybody is working on their own, but basically, and 4 different stories, but nothing is really getting done. So basically, one of the idea which comes from the Kanban is that stop starting, start finishing. So you should focus on finishing more than starting more. Fine. And from the Kanban standpoint, we focus on basically uh, doing the limit in I mean, creating a limit in progress, uh, our I mean, the in progress items. So that is the concept of the Kanban, where we mechanically, depending on the numbers, will limit the number. So let's say that we will be working only on 2 items. Fine. So that is a kind of static number which we try to follow in Kanban. But you will see that in Scrum, if you really work using Scrum, then you don't even need that number. So we'll see like how that can be done. But the point, what I'm trying to say with this here, is that Scrum team not doing Scrum is that they are not following the Scrum to its spirit. And the spirit is working as one team together towards one common goal, right? Which you can see from this picture. Another thing which you see is that uh, I mean, because of people are not collaborating, one of the symptom which you see here is that the daily Scrum becomes a status meeting in disguise. Fine. Uh, People are not very excited. People are not very motivated to join them, because at the end of the day, they are giving the status update to the Scrum Master. But that was never the goal of this daily Scrum meeting. But the kind of I mean, and this the whole idea of this 3-question based daily Scrum doesn't really work. Fine. So from that perspective, uh, I mean, there are alternatives, and Scrum Guide also says that 3-question based daily Scrum is an optional, and you can choose whatever implementation you want. So we will show in this session that what can be the better alternative instead of having a um, uh, I mean status update based kind of daily Scrum, where everybody updates what he has done, what he is doing, and what are the impediments. And so the focus is on the individual productivity, like what he's doing actually, instead of where we are on the sprint. Fine. So think about it like, in case, for example, 2 or 3 members are working on a user story. One is a tester, 2 are developers, and they are going in a round robin ways and telling their updates. So at the end of the daily Scrum, you will not know like what is the status of the story, for example. Fine. Where we are on that. Uh, so so the point is that, like, what is the better alternative where it is more collaborative effort instead of individual effort. So we will focus on that as well. And this basically is basically we just discussed. So these are the things which are all about why teams lack self-organization. And let me go into the symptoms. One you have seen is that a lot of in progress items. If you see this symptom, that is because of the lack of collaboration in the team. um, Second symptom is I mean, as you see with this picture from Henrik Nieberg presentation, this is all about Scrum Zombie, where everybody just comes and basically talks about stuff, but they are all not really motivated or enjoying what these ceremonies or events. Fine. I am seeing some basically chat messages, so I will be so first of all, I think just to let you know that this is getting recorded. So I'll be sharing this slide deck as well. Um, and at the same time, if you have questions, so we will be discussing them as soon as the presentation gets finished. You can put your questions here, and I will be discussing each one of them. Fine. So with that, let me go back. Okay, so this is one of the problem which you see in the teams, and the point is that here you find that team members are joining these events just because they have to do it. Think about a situation when everybody is self-organized. They they are collaborating with each other and they are working with each other, and they're so they know like what needs to be done, and they are really taking the center stage in those events instead of as an individual. So that will be quite a different way of looking at these events. So we will be talking about them. Another thing which you find is the knowledge islands. So because everybody works solo, because of that, what happens is that certain people have the expertise in doing certain work, and uh, so for example, a new story comes in that particular field. You give that story to that person only because he's more comfortable around that story. So that is a kind of fallout of not having the I mean, collaborative way of working, where you are sharing the knowledge every now and then, and anybody can work on anything at any point of time. So instead of that, you find the knowledge islands inside your team. So let's try to see what can be the target conditions. So these are the symptoms which you also see, like what are the problems, and then let's try to see where we want to go. Fine. So you don't require a scrum master to conduct scrum events. So I mean, even if that guy is not there, it should not happen like that. Scrum events are not happening, and that generally happens not because they are not important. They just happen because people don't find motivated enough to give their status update in those kind of meetings. They work as they go as an individual, where they are basically, they feel that maybe they are micromanaged as part of way of working instead of collaborative way of working. So in case that fear is not there, and they basically working together, so the motivation of going back to those same scrum events may be entirely different. So then that means, because nobody is taking their status update, then they basically do not require scrum master for in case that guy is not available. They will be motivated enough to continue with that. Fine. Second is development team inspects and adapt on a continual basis. So one situation is that I mean, I've seen it in many teams where there are teams where many people don't even speak as part of the retrospective. It stays silent, everybody's silent, and only one or two people will be speaking. Fine. Uh, and so that means, first of all, the whatever is happening in the team is not coming out as part of retrospective. Second is uh, people are just maybe choosing just the retrospective as part of the inspect and adapt. What about as and when there are problems, there are there are changes, teams are basically sitting together and finding out like what can be done in this situation, resolving the problems as and when they come. And it's not about the problems only, they are adapting the process as well. They're improving it on a continual basis, based on whatever observations they have, they can see. They are open enough to discuss to each other, and basically find trying to find out better way of working. Fine. So the point is that team is actually agile. Agile is all about being flexible to take up any upcoming challenge. And I have seen that kind of situation where, I mean, depending on the requirement of the project, new uh, technology set comes into picture. People learn on the go. They even learn different skills. So, for example, front end developers try to learn backend. Backend developer try to learn front end, and they become cross skilled, T-shaped. Fine. So they can basically take any challenge. One of the things which I have seen is that uh, in such situation, even if somebody goes for leaves, goes sick, they can any new person can start working on that piece of code from that time onwards, because they have been collaborating on a continual basis. And you don't it's never happens that that person will come back and they will start working on that particular piece of code. That never happens. Continuous knowledge sharing and no resultant knowledge islands. So that is well understood what I'm talking about. You speak to team members. So one of the symptom I have seen is that whenever you talk to the team about, you think about a team, then only few members come into your mind. So they may be scrum master, or they may be your tech lead, or whatever you call them, technical architect. But you cannot, sometimes you are not able to even think who are the team members, and they are not very kind of prominently visible in terms of the contribution. So that is one situation. Instead of that, it is other way around. So scrum master is never visible, because he's a servant leader, and he's making sure that the more people are coming out to speak, and basically are they're much more visible than him actually. So you see more faces, more team member faces, instead of only few members over there. So this is the kind of target condition we are talking about. So let's see like how to move towards that. So moving towards collaboration as default culture. Um, so one of the things before I take the new slides is to make sure that somehow people think have been thinking about Agile just Scrum, but I think but if you think about original signatories of Agile Manifesto, they are all technical people. So without technical competency, they or engineering practices. I mean, Scrum just is a skeleton. Inside this, whatever meat you're producing comes through the engineering practices. And if you are not really doing those engineering practices, you are not actually doing Agile actually. Fine. So so with this background, many teams I have seen, they are not really even have taken into consideration pair programming, uh, which is one of the key engineering practice of extreme programming. Fine. And so I will be talking about why basically people are not using it, and why it is very useful for moving towards collaboration as a default culture. So I'll just introduce it with this. So let's first of all talk about what exactly is pair programming. Sometimes people have different misconception, which what they say is that, okay, we will as and when we have some problem, then we will be discussing it together, and that is pair programming. Um, and so another thing is that if we have some hard problems, then we will discuss, otherwise we will work solo. Um, so there are different misconceptions. So let me at least talk about like what it is all about. So so you have so two people work on the same task. One is called driver, who types, and that who focuses on the tactics, and the navigator is the one who focuses on the strategy. Fine. So how the code fits into the overall design, refactoring, test, and all that. Fine. So these two programmers switch roles frequently. That means the navigator becomes driver, driver becomes navigator. Fine. So let's try to understand like why the hell, like why we are talking about driver navigator. So there is an underlying uh, study around it, and the problem is that um, I mean, at one point of time, the human mind can do one thing. Fine. So think about it, like if you are going on a unknown journey. So what you do is either you will be looking at the map uh, manually, or you will be talking to the people, or basically you will be driving. So it may be difficult to do both at, at the same time in unison. Even if you're doing it, it may not be very comfortable. Fine. uh, so so that is one situation two, where you have a map, you have a navigator. So earlier days, we didn't have the Google Map, so which right now is our navigator. Fine. So instead of that, we had manual I mean people who used to be the navigator while we are driving. Fine. So even if you consider as Google Map as a navigator, so navigator is telling you how to go, and you're just driving. So in that way, the driving become very comfortable. Fine. Compared to that, if you look at driving on your own, and on an unknown terrain, then it is not that easy. In a similar way, if you think about software development, it's not something which is like uh, which is like some algorithmic work that's like, for example, 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. So in case somebody is can carry 50 kilogram weight, then two persons will be able to take 100 kilograms of weight. Fine. So it's not algorithmic way of working. It's more a knowledge working where you need to think, you need to, and then you need to do, and that requires, I mean, good amount of uh, patience and understanding. And that's why people, you will find that it becomes very difficult to go into zone where you are really enjoying your work. So that's why you, if you work solo, then you will find that out of 8 hours, then maybe you are 2 or 3 hours are productive. Fine. And that is because of this reason, like we are either we are able to think or able to type. So uh, the programming is both. You have to basically design a lot, and then you have to type. It's not just pure typing. It's not just a data entry job. It is more about thinking what can be the better way of designing. So that way, uh, I mean, you find that you need somebody, if you somebody is there to basically work as a navigator for you, and telling you like what needs to be done next. You're focusing on the driving, that means coding, and you will never go out of the zone. Actually, you can, all the time you can go into zone. So instead of getting the productivity of 2 or 3 hours a day, you may be getting a productivity of 8 hours, which may be very exhaustive. Fine. So that's why basically, with this background, so this was a kind of question: why pair programming? Why should I invest on for two programmers for the same task? So the thing is that pair programming is not pair of typing, and the two programmers are still doing two programmers worth of work. They are just doing it together rather than individually. So value is much more than typing. Think about it, like what are the advantages? One is, you you may be having a lot of distractions, like phones, your friends coming for the tea, for the cup of tea, uh, Facebook, or many things which distract you. Think about it, like when you're working together, then you don't have time to get distracted. You will be much more focused. Second thing is that implicit knowledge sharing, because you are working together, then that means somebody other than you also knows what is happening inside this piece of code. So in case you go out sick, then I mean he can take from there, from where basically you left last day. And also, like, because you keep on switching the people, it's not like you will be working on that story for the whole week or for the whole sprint. You will keep on changing your partners, and that way you will get to know what other people are doing. So that is a better way of knowledge sharing. Fine. Implicit code review, you have design discussions, instead of just uh, your own thinking. So you, two people think about it, brainstorm, you find real evolutionary design. So so one of the, so with this discussion, one of the thing which comes out is that in case you are doing the pair programming, so that becomes your default way of getting into the collaboration. Fine. So what I've seen is that you basically pair program on everything which is getting into the production, which needs to be maintained. Fine. You can basically may not be doing the pair programming on the things which where you do need to think, you need to research, you need to look at test things from the based on research. So there you can leave, and then basically you can come back when you're finished. So this is one of the thing which I've seen which has really worked well, and people come closer as a team working together. So that is one. Let me extend it a little bit more on that. So this is the idea basically, which comes from a single piece flow. So that comes from the Toyota production system. And what I will be talking about is kind of uh, I mean uh, narrowing the columns. Uh, if you think about, let's think about the Kanban. So you have multiple columns, and somehow people have the understanding that only depending on the lanes people have to work. So if the person is in the testing column, then tester will work. Somebody is doing the reviews, and then somebody will review on that. Fine. So so people have big, I mean, take some kind of siloed mindset based on the number of columns that your workflow may have. Let's try to see like how that can be optimized, and again that is based on the collaboration, based on the swarming technique, which we will be talking in Scrum. Fine. So this single piece flow is taken from the Toyota production system, where the whole idea is that uh, instead of taking multiple pieces in progress, you take one item. So let's take an example. You are trying to create the some some pieces, and there may be multiple steps towards that. So what you can do is you do the one steps for multiple pieces, and it become the batch, and then you take to take the whole batch into the next step. So this is basically assembly line basic which used to happen. But instead of that, what you do is that you take one piece, and you take it to the production, uh, and then you take another one. So instead of creating batches, you basically focus also on one by one flow. Fine. So this is the idea, which is basically very efficient, because instead of getting something within, for example, 5 minutes into out of the cycle, that may finish within 10 seconds, for example. I'm just giving some vague numbers, but the idea is that single piece flow is much more powerful, or very efficient. So that's what basically Toyota production system really follows. So this is assembly line, where everybody takes up what in batches. So this is the assembly line in software. So you plan, you analyze, you design, you code, you test, and deploy. Fine. Uh, so so that is basically waterfall. And let's talk about the one piece flow, where you take one raw material and you get into the finished good as one piece actually. So this is again from the batching concept. So in the first picture you see, you are taking batches into process A, process B, process C, and here in the continuous flow, you are taking one by one in ABC. Fine. So that way it is much more faster. So here you get something as a lead time as a 30 plus minute for the total order, 1 minutes for the first piece. But here the first piece comes in 3 minutes only. So let's get it get a little bit further on that. So this is basically the concept of the work cell in manufacturing. So think about it like you may be having a lot of machines in manufacturing: lathe, drill, mill, inspect, drill, and test, drill. So all those things. So there are multiple steps inside that. So what I mean, Ford Motors used to do is that they used to have one person for each machine, and eh, so so basically that his job used to be monotonous. In case something goes wrong, then I mean, machine used to stop, and he used to correct it. Otherwise, basically, he used to see what is going on the lathe machine, for example. So in this process, you find that around 5 to 6 people should be there to basically look at this process, or more than that. But the whole idea of the work cell is, first of all, is to make sure that I mean, you you remove the delays. So first of all, to make sure that everything is very close. So instead of having a quite a distance and thereby producing delays because of the handovers, everything is very close. So you can see everything together in a U shell cell, for example, L shape or U cell. Now another thing which you see is that instead of 6 person working on it, uh, there are 2 or 3 persons who are working on it. Fine. So the idea is that they may be having the understanding of another machines as well to basically work upon them. So the same concept can be taken into IT as well, where what you can do is that instead of having uh, different people for different skills, there may be people with the multi skills or the cross skilling uh, in your I mean in your workflow, and they may be looking at multiple steps. So it may happen that one person is looking at the front end and back end together, for example, or there can be many different combinations. So it's not like that. Only one person will be doing one thing and he gets limited forever in that is towards his whole life. The whole idea is that when you are working in a collaborative fashion, then you try to learn other things as well. So as a front end developer, you try to learn back end as well, because you may be pair programming with a back end person, and back end person may be trying to learn the front end as well. So that way you are minimizing the handoffs, and that way you are minimizing the delays in finishing a feature, for example. So that is the idea of the work cell in IT, where as a multiple people you may be working together on a user story and finishing it as soon as possible. If you So another thing which basically you can even take it further is that uh, right now there may be some people, like for example one front end person or one or two people working on a story, and one is a tester who is working on that. What about the story is big and big enough, and so what instead of small one? So instead of that, what about having multiple pairs working on that story? So instead of basically finishing the development within 7 days because it is pretty big, what about 3 pairs work on that and finish that development within 2 days, for example, and give it for the testing? Fine. So that is the idea of the swarming as well. So the point is that you don't have to limit your thoughts that one person will be working on one thing. Depending on the situation, you can see like how many people are required on that. So by default you say that a pair will be working on it, and if not, then if it is large one, then maybe multiple pairs will be working on it together and finishing that, maybe dividing the user story into subtasks, technically working to closely together and finishing that as soon as possible. So this is one of the example of the work cell here. So so if you take the idea of this work cell and the pair programming uh, together, then the question is like how do we basically focus on the daily scrum? Fine. So are we talking about just are we just giving our updates, or it can be beyond that? Fine. So how does a collaborative team does its own daily scrum? So let's talk about that. So before that, this is one of the quote from Jim Coplian. Daily scrum is a sprint planning in small. You replan the sprint every day. So the point is that every day you see where you are, and based on that you see. So for example, last day in the first day you said, okay, for this story we think that pairs should one of the pairs should work on it and should be able to finish it today. But then next day you find that oh, this has much more complexity, and this will not be we will not be able to finish it with one pair. So what about having two pairs on it? So the point is that you, depending on the situation which is happening in the sprint, you are replanning every day. You may be looking for the help, you may be looking for extra people, you may be changing the plans every day. So the idea is towards going towards the sprint goal, and it is not mechanical that it just stays there forever in that state. Every day you see like where you are on in the sprint, and you make the changes in your plan. Fine. So with that background, this is the basically idea of the collaborative daily scrum. So the idea is that uh, instead of everybody giving their status update, uh, you basically go with the priorities of the stories, and you see like you see like how many people may be required on this story. So that can be done like when you basically drill down into the story, you find out the tasking of on a development level, and you find out how many hours are required. I mean, as an kind of big estimation on that story, you will find that okay, maybe 2 or 3 days, one day, half a day, something like that. You get some idea about it, and based on that, you say okay, if because is a larger one, maybe multiple pairs needs to work on it, or if it is a smaller one, maybe one pair is sufficient on it. And now what you do is, as part of daily scrum, you just go based on the story. So we are talking about the story. This is where we are on that on this story. We will be finishing it, or maybe we will take another one story after this one. So so the point so and the point is that it's not only uh, individual people are talking about it. The entire number of people. So maybe, for example, 3 pairs are working on that story. So then all these 3 pairs give talk about where they are at as part of the day on that story. Fine. So that way, if you think about the daily scrum, it is more focused towards the stories or the task on your scrum board, instead of talking about what did you do yesterday. I mean, who cares about what did you do yesterday? I mean, I definitely we care, but the point is where we are in the sprint, that is much more important. The sprint goal is much more important and not the individual targets. So this kind of collaborative daily scrum really helps in basically changing the mindset, the way you work. Right. So so with this idea, like what we talked about is that if you're trying to go towards self-organization, one of the key ingredient what I've seen is that you should try to work in a collaborative way. If you're not working in a collaborative way, you will never be self-organized. That is one thing. Second thing, which is that you basically uh, may not want to limit only with the pair programming. Depending on the situations, you may want to create groups of the pair programmers to work on the task and finish the goal which you have actually. So in and when we talk about the pair programming, swarming, and basically switching the people, switching the task, think about it like, and when you're switching these things, you're working with multiple people, you will, I mean, and versus you are working in a corner. So it's a huge transition. And then if this team will not be self-organized, who will be actually? And in my experience, I have seen that these teams or these team members do not require anybody, because they already know where they are, what they are working, and things like that, and they don't require anybody to take their status update. So with this, uh, I am open to the questions right now. uh, Let me see if there are any questions on the chat. So one question is that work simplicity, and how Agile helps in getting that. Uh, I think, I mean, one of the Agile principle is, simplicity is about the amount of work not to be done. So it is more about to see where the waste is, and find out, like, what, instead of creating more and more feature, you need to see, like, what feature needs to be taken out. uh, Implicitly it doesn't really help, but basically what you need to do is, instead of, before you get into the implementation, which is about Agile, you need to focus towards design thinking. You need to have, like, workshops on that, and then, or some of the uh, MVPs, using lean startup techniques to validate your learning in a very cost effective way. So when we talk about the MVP, to me it is more about minimum viable prototype, and instead of a product, because it's not a product anyways at that point of time. So you basically validate your prototypes, and then based on that you try to learn what is the simpler enough for the end users. um, can you please give real time examples of self-organization? I think I discussed about it. I mean, the idea of self-organizing team from the Scrum standpoint. Then, if the team is not self-organized, is it not the problem Scrum Master? I don't think that the self-organizing team is a problem of the Scrum Master. I would say that this is a problem of the system. Is so Scrum Master may be the part of the system only, because, for example, in your company, there is no culture of the pair programming. Then, I mean, and people question in your management that, why are you doing the pair programming? Then how can you do the pair programming? So, many times it is because of the lack of education. People don't really understand what we are talking about, why we are doing these. And another thing which why I find is that people even don't do any kind of experiments. So Scrum is all about courage, but people don't sometime have the courage to even experiment, for example, pair programming for a week, to see whether it's working for you or not. And in case you are not basically, if you think about Scrum as well, is an empirical framework. So you are able to uh, see based on what you do actually. So until unless you implement certain practices, you don't get to know whether they are useful or not. Many times we don't even try them actually. So that's why, that is one of the reasons that we don't. And so another thing is that by default we have been working as solos. Our education system doesn't promote pairing, working together. This is more about competitive way of working. Everybody gives exams separately instead of working together. So we come from that mindset, and that continues for a long time. So until unless we try with different experiments. Next is, when you say that Scrum methodology in Agile, we are not sure about the final status each day. Are we not maintaining the breakdown chart? There is no breakdown chart; is a burn down chart, and uh, we we are not sure the final status or each day. I'm not able to understand that. I think maybe you are talking about. Um I mean, where we are. So some actually, I mean, how many people really see the burn down chart actually? I mean, think about it in your team itself. Like, how many people really see the burn down chart? Who cares? And how many people really talk about the sprint status where we are actually? The focus majorly remains on the individual. Everybody comes on a stand up as a ritual, talks about stuff, and then goes back on their seat. And at the end of the daily stand up, you daily Scrum, you don't have any idea where you are on the in the sprint actually. Retrospective is not for inspection, it is for learning from the past experiences, meaning sprints and improve on the future. So this is a question, um, not a question, is a comment. Retrospective is not for inspection, it is for learning from past experiences, meaning sprints, and improve on the future sprints on and adopt best practices if any. So uh, see the see the whole idea of the Scrum is inspect and adapt, and inspecting is all about where what did you do? Yes, I mean what went well, what didn't go so well. So it's all about inspection, and based on that you find out what can work for you, and then that is about adaptation. That is how you adapt actually. Cross skill. So next question is cross skill dev doing QA doesn't seem to be effective. What is the best practice around that? Uh, so that is coming from Anand. So first of all, I think there is some kind of misconception here. If you think about some of the best working teams in the world, let's talk about Google, Microsoft, or Netflix, or any other teams. In those teams, uh, developers also are responsible for the quality. So whatever the automation tests needs to be created have to be created by the developers only. Um, Tester maybe working as a consultant, maybe helping them out to give that perspective, helping in creating the test scenarios. But as far as the implementation is concerned, people basically do that as part of their daily job. Uh, Next one is if you realize that Scrum meeting are turning into more semester status meeting in disguise, what are the immediate steps that can be taken to make this team agile and interactive? So, so basically, I discussed about the collaborative daily Scrum. Please Google on that, and there is an article on that. You can be it gives you the whole idea how you can basically use uh, collaborative daily Scrum in your team, as part of your team, as part of your daily Scrum, and you will find that it will be much more effective than basically focusing on the individuals. I need to submit. Okay, I need to submit your email address to get the credit in Scrum Alliance. Will that be provided? So my email is, I'm just writing here. Uh, so my email ID is svashishtha@malnos.in. So I just wrote it. The next one is, do you think experienced developers really need a navigator? Definitely. I mean, everybody needs a navigator. Uh, uh, it depends. Like in case a experienced developer is also going into the unknown terrain. Think about it: is if you are a very good driver, but if you are going into unknown terrain, then definitely you will be trying to look for the help of a map. Fine. Similarly, a navigator. So in case it's a known terrain, then definitely you can drive on your own. But the point is that experience. I mean, I mean, in your team, you will not be having only experienced people. You will be having experienced people, non-experienced people, and it is the team work which is important uh, instead of individual experienced people. So if they basically work together, then those inexperienced people also become experienced. They are basically, so what I've seen is that if you get a new person in your team, on an already working team, and you basically make him work solo, then that person will take for 3 to 4 months to be effective, because what he will be doing is that he will be reinventing the wheel all the time. Something which takes, for example, 5 minutes, he will be struggling for that for the whole day, and then finding it out that it can be done in 5 minutes. Similarly, there will be a lot of shortcuts which people have, which will know as part of their experience. So he'll be learning them for a long time actually. So by the time he's effective, already 4 months or 6 months are gone. So instead of that, what about doing the pair programming in detail from day one? So that way, that person will be much performant within couple of weeks. But that's what I've seen actually, and will be able to contribute to your team cause. So so that is so that is a concept basically we need to see. Uh, Pair programming in our team setup has been tried and failed for multiple times. There is never a right mix of the resource and time make it possible. Are there alternative to it that can be equally effective? Um, Actually, this pair programming thing requires a detailed discussion, which will not be possible in this time because we already. So I'll be taking another session just focused towards the pair programming only, and which will be much more detailed. Next one is, isn't it waste of resource time spending on the same story as a driver is working already? I think I already explained the example that the kind of time we basically remain effective. It's not about our knowledge working job is not just typing, which it seems basically, but it's not. There is there is a lot of effort going into understanding the problem in designing it in trying to find a solution. If multiple people are working together, that becomes much more easier than working as an individual. So I think from that perspective we have to see. And another thing which we have to really see is that instead of denying this concept just because it doesn't really seem logical, uh, I mean, it is much. It will be very important that if you try to implement it in the right spirit and see if it works or not. Because world's best teams have been uh, best teams have been using pair programming for a long time, even before Agile came into picture. Fine. So extreme programming was already there before Agile came into picture. So let's next one is how to evaluate individual performance when we implement pair programming. It has to go into the next session on the pair programming. It requires a detailed discussion. Uh, then what is your opinion on value driven sprint value driven sprint? I think, yeah, I think that is basically the world is going towards. So what people are doing these days is that instead of having a definition of done where your done, it means that it goes to delivery. What they are extending that definition of done to validated. That means it goes to the production, and you basically look at the matrices from coming from the production and see whether your feature is working the way it was intended. Fine. You will be using A/B testing, or you will be using continuous deployment to basically move this feature quickly. So all that, those things, and so that's where basically world is moving towards that, and that is the idea of the definition of done in the lean startup terms, that you, instead of just delivering the feature, you try to see uh, you try to get the validated learning out of that. Fine. So that is where the world is moving towards. uh, okay, I think that is it for this session. Thank you very much for attending it and remaining there for till such times. Thank you very much. And I will be coming with the next session, which will be interesting. And if you have any opinion, like some of the sessions you want to basically want to get conducted, please let me know, and you can submit the titles, and I will try to do those sessions as well. Thank you very much.